together, Joseph had just interpreted some dreams from the royal cupbearer and the baker. And the royal cupbearer, I want to say the royal cup maker in the worst kind of way, and that just doesn't make any sense. The royal cupbearer has been elevated back to his original position, and Joseph had asked him one favor, that when he returned to the Pharaoh's palace, that he would remember Joseph and speak to Pharaoh on his account. And we read where the chief cupbearer forgot Joseph. We're picking up now in 41. After 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile. And behold, there came up out of the Nile 7 cows, attractive and plump, and they fed in the reed grass. And behold, 7 other cows, ugly and thin, came up out of the Nile after them and stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly, thin cows ate up the 7 attractive, plump cows. And Pharaoh awoke. And he fell asleep and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of grain, plump and good, were growing on one stalk. And behold, after them sprouted 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump, full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So in the morning, his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh. We get a sneak peek into the house of Pharaoh, or more so, Pharaoh's dream life. It's been 2 years since the royal cupbearer has returned to the palace. 2 years. We're not told how Joseph never crossed his mind during that time. There isn't an explanation given for how these things could happen. I'm certain that Pharaoh had a dream before this. But for 2 years, there has been no movement, no activity with regard to the freeing of Joseph. He's still under house arrest. He's still in jail. Nothing for him has changed. But here in Pharaoh's palace, he has 2 dreams. One of nice, plump, juicy ribeye, cows. Seven of them, in fact. And they're just grazing, eating the reeds by the Nile River. And then these 7 very thin, emaciated cows appear. And now, if they had all of those sports betting sites back then, I bet you FanDuel would have had a very high price on the fat cows taking care of the emaciated ones. We just think the strong survive. But in this dream, these 7 emaciated cows ate the plump, full cows. Now, That's a strange dream because cows don't eat cows. It was enough that it woke Pharaoh up. And I'm sure his first thought was, I really need to watch how much I eat before I go to sleep. That was kind of crazy. And he dozes back off. Cows are no longer running through his mind. Now it's stalks of grain. One stalk with 7 plump, good grain heads growing. And then another appears. But these have been scorched by the southeast wind that blows through that area of the world periodically. And these ears are frail, small, shriveling. There's nothing to them. And lo and behold, these 7 weak heads of grain eat up the good grain. Pharaoh wakes up. He realizes it was a dream. Well, it's more of a nightmare. I picture this as zombie corn and zombie cows. He realizes that there has to be meaning to some of this. There has to be something going on. So he does what he would always do. He calls for his magicians and all of the wise men to interpret this dream because he's troubled by it. It makes no sense. And all Scripture tells us, but there was no one who could interpret them to Pharaoh. Now we have to trust that. No one was able to give an interpretation to Pharaoh. Perhaps they just couldn't figure it out. Perhaps someone understood it, but they weren't about to be the one to tell Pharaoh that the bad stuff's going to happen. You know, sometimes people like to shoot the messenger. So he couldn't get an interpretation, and his spirit remained troubled. But lo and behold. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses today. When Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me and the chief baker in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, we dreamed on the same night, he and I, each having a dream with its own interpretation. Excuse me. A young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. When we told him, he interpreted our dreams to us, giving an interpretation to each man according to his dream. And as he interpreted it to us, so it came about. I was restored to my office, and the baker was hanged. 2 years! And the cupbearer overhears the conversation between the magicians and the wise men and the Pharaoh. And all of a sudden that light bulb goes off over his head. And he tells this to Pharaoh. I remember my offenses. The first being what got me there. The second is I forgot a man that you really need to know about right now. See, he was able to interpret the dreams that both I and the baker had. They were legitimate. They came true. I was restored and he was hanged. Oh, to have ear of the king, or in this case, the Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, it is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, behold, in my dream I was standing on the banks of the Nile. 7 cows, plump and attractive, came up out of the Nile and fed in the reed grass. 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and thin, such as I have never seen in all of the land of Egypt. And the thin, ugly cows ate up the first 7 plump cows. But when they had eaten them, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were still as ugly as at the beginning. Then I awoke. I also saw in my dream 7 ears growing on one stalk, full and good. 7 ears withered, thin, and blighted by the east wind sprouted after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears, and I told it to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. Pharaoh hears of Joseph. Someone who has interpreted dreams before. Not just interpreted, but the interpretation came out perfectly. You notice Pharaoh wastes no time. He sends and he calls for Joseph. Joseph is quickly brought to him. Of course, first Joseph shaves and changes his clothes. We make point of that because Egyptians tended to be clean-shaven in those days. Hebrew men like to have that beard. Joseph has been in prison at least 2 years and a bit. Of course, he'd have some growth. So he's doing what he can to fit in front of Pharaoh. He shaves and he puts on different clothes. And he comes before him. Pharaoh says, I've had a dream and I have heard that you can interpret it. You notice how Joseph doesn't give any small talk? He doesn't say, how have you heard this? He probably knows. Notice he doesn't go into, well, yeah, that cupbearer yours forgot all about me for 2 years, but now when it serves good purpose for him, here I am. Doesn't present any of that. It's not of concern. His response to Pharaoh's, and I've heard you can interpret it. Joseph responds, no, not I. God will give Pharaoh an answer. Not just an answer, a favorable answer. God will tell you all that you need to know. And then Pharaoh goes into his story. This is what I dreamed. He gives a little bit more detail. We find out that he has never seen cows this thin and ugly in all the history of Egypt. And he just can't make any sense of it. And no one can explain it to me. Pharaoh's confused. He's nervous. He's scared. Verse 25. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, these dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blighted by the east wind are also 7 years of famine. It is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout the land of Egypt. But after them, there will arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine that will follow. For it will be very severe. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that the thing is fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it about. Excuse me. Pharaoh retells his dream. And Joseph, once again, you notice, just goes into the interpretation. He doesn't need to pause. He doesn't need to think about it. God is with him. He knows God's presence there. And he begins to reveal to Pharaoh what God is about to do. Yes, for 7 years, it's going to be great. The golden age of Egypt. Food will be plentiful. Everything will be just fine. But after that, a great famine is coming. It'll consume all of the land. And people will not remember the good times because it's so bad. And that you dreamt it twice means God has fixed it. You can't escape it. You can't deviate from it. It is going to happen. And it's going to start soon. Now, I don't know what it would be like giving that kind of news to a reigning monarch. But I am almost certain that Pharaoh wasn't excited. He wasn't happy. He didn't want to throw a party. I'm sure he started to wonder and he started to think, what can we do about this? Fortunately, Joseph's there, picking up in 33. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years. And let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. That food shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine. Why do I see in my mind Pharaoh saying, okay, you wanted me to interpret your dream. Here's the interpretation, and I'll give you a fix to your problem free of cost. We'll just throw that in. Here's what you need to do. You need to take this time serious. Good days are coming. You need to set aside a reserve. In fact, I'd say 1/5. Store it up. Keep it. Oh, that would be a lot of work for you. So Pharaoh, I recommend you appointing someone ahead of all of the agriculture of the land. And appoint others in each city to make sure this is being carried out so that this nation will have enough when the bad times come. That way, the land may not perish through the famine. Verse 37. This proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all of this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him ride in his second chariot. And they called out before him, bow the knee. Thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent, no one shall lift up hand or foot in all of the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zephanath-Paneah, and he gave him in marriage Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. So Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. I think it's safe to say Joseph made quite an impact on Pharaoh. Pharaoh recognizes Joseph's ability. Although it doesn't seem to be a learned ability, it truly seems to be something God-given. Since God has shown you all this. It's interesting. As Joseph would refer to God, he would say Elohim, the generic name for God. But in that, in its most basic sense, is the God, a definite God, one, an individual, not able to be confused. And Pharaoh has always responded without that article with just a God. But it changes ever so slightly as Pharaoh starts to use the God here. Pharaoh is recognizing there is something special and unique about Joseph that isn't just human. He speaks of his intention. Where can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? The intention is to elevate him, to make him something, someone to be used for the goodness of Egypt. Then he specifically states, you are wise and discerning. You shall be over my house. He implements it. Now I want you to think how far Joseph has come. From Potiphar's house, the house arrest, to the house of Pharaoh. Now, that sounds like a wonderful story for us. I mean, when we read it, it's 3 chapters? Very quick. The years have gone by. Many, many years. Yes, Pharaoh is going to elevate Joseph to be second in command of all of Egypt. He gets the ring that can sign laws. He gets the fancy clothes. He gets the gold chain around his neck. He gets to take the second chariot. You know, the first one's Pharaoh's, and then there's Joseph's. And Pharaoh takes him through the city. Why do I see like a ticker tape parade? Joseph is getting introduced to the nation that he will serve as second in command. But to make it all right, to make it all proper, to confirm it all so everybody's on board, Joseph is no good Egyptian name. Let us give you this new name, and it's wonderful. Yeah, I'm not going to pronounce it again. It's wonderful because scholars argue left and right over what that name means. It has been argued that everything from God speaks and he lives, the man who knows things, sustainer of life, the living one. And one even dared say that name means kitchen. I mean, we're all over the map, but each one provided just an idea that life will come to Egypt because of this man. And that big long name gives him an air of authenticity. And to do it just one better, here, let me give you a good Egyptian daughter as wife. Perhaps you'll find it interesting that outside of this chapter, we never hear of this name for Joseph or his wife again. Verse 46. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. He's 30 years old now. If you wanted to turn back, you would find out Joseph was thrown in the pit by his brothers when he was 17. 13 years he's been in Egypt. During the 7 plentiful years, the earth produced abundantly. And he gathered up all the food of these 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt and put the food in the cities. He put in every city the food from the fields around it. And Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. Before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, a priest of On, bore them to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For, he said, God has made me forget all my hardships and all my father's house. The name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. 13 years of turmoil, trouble, brokenheartedness, and God has finally moved Joseph to the place that he can minister to a nation. He provides him with 2 sons. He has a future. And for Egypt and the surrounding areas, Joseph is the hope. The 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end. The 7 years of famine began to come, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph. What he says to you, do." So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt, to Joseph, to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth. Shouldn't surprise us, but still many times it does. God always provides a way forward. You see, circumstances and situations don't catch God off guard. He tries to prepare us for those moments. Now, I will give you many times he doesn't prepare us like he prepared Pharaoh. We don't always get this elaborate dream and someone come in and tell us exactly what's going to happen because God has deemed it. But God does move us into people's lives. People who meet specific needs in our lives. Sometimes it's for comfort and empathy. Sometimes it's for challenge. Sometimes it's both. Many times we don't understand it's happening while it's happening. But church, we must always listen. Because salvation, not just for Egypt, but for the world as it was known as that at that time, would come because of Egypt. And Egypt would be spared because of a ransomed 17-year-old was sold into slavery there and went through 13 years of anguish, jail, and forgottenness. But God didn't forget. The entire time, God was shaping that young man to be exactly what God needed to save the world. There's a little bit of there are a few similarities, in fact, if you look real closely at the life of Joseph and the life of Noah. Noah was building an ark so that a family could survive torrential downpours and a flood. And how did he do it? One board at a time. And when it started to rain, God locked them in and set them a sail, and they were saved. Here, it's storehouses and silos that Joseph constructs in years when there is so much food that the idea of shortness or hunger was crazy. But he was preparing. Because when that day hit and there was nothing, people would have perished. But God desired salvation. They went to Pharaoh. What did Pharaoh say? Go to Joseph and do what he says. Almost sounds vaguely familiar with a wedding in Canaan. We've run out of the essentials. We're going to be the laughingstock of the whole community. Mary, what do? Go to Jesus. Do what he tells you. Church, do we listen closely enough to hear God saying, come to Jesus? Salvation is found nowhere else. Strength and survival is in his words. They're in his being. Apart from him, there's nothing. You know, in many ways, we are the storehouses. Each one of us individually has all that we need in an overabundance of knowledge of salvation. But God desires the world to be saved. So this week I say go out and share abundantly. If you want to throw in a ribeye and some grain, that's okay too. But the importance is Jesus. For you, for me, and the millions out there that are still scared and uncertain and anxious. He's the one that brings peace.